Welcome to Hearing from the Matriarchs. In this episode, we will be hearing from Professor Faye McMillan, a Wiradjuri and distinguished academic. This podcast series is brought to you by the New South Wales Mental Health Commission and the Bagaragan Steering Committee of the Elder Women as Carers Project. The all-Indigenous, all-female committee are proud to bring you this content and hope that you can connect with the women and stories in this podcast. Professor Faye McMillan has dedicated her career to improving health outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. She was the first Aboriginal person to become a qualified pharmacist and is an Order of Australia recipient. She has many professional achievements, but as she will explain in this podcast, her motivations were personal and based on helping others. Here is her story.
Yirrdumarang. My name is Faye McMillan. I am a Wiradjuri woman, proudly from Trangie, Central West in New South Wales. I am a community pharmacist, Professor of Indigenous Health, Deputy National Rural Health Commissioner for Allied Health and First Peoples Health. I also sit on boards such as SBS, the New South Wales Community Mental Health Board, and a number of other. I'm a proud sibling. I'm here doing this podcast from the Comanche Nation in Austin, Texas, as a Harkness Fellow. And this has happened alongside of the years that the project has happened. So I'm just going to read something that I think defines who I am. I ask you to close your eyes. I'm about to tell you a story. It is a very personal story and not one that I share with you for pity. It is my reality and unfortunately the reality for so many other young people around the globe. Do you remember when you were 15, what you were doing and what was happening in your life? Did you feel young and carefree and not afraid of what the world had to offer you? For me, I'm 15 years old, and as I look around the courtroom, the only face I see that is familiar to me is that of my stepfather. He is the reason that I am sitting in a witness box. It is his actions and his choices to sexually assault my younger sister and myself that have led to this moment. His lawyer is asking me if I was being provocative, which gave my stepfather the impression that I'd wanted his advances. I remember the sense of shame that I felt when I had to ask the judge what provocative meant, and I recall thinking to myself that I am never going to allow someone to use words to take away my power. Education is a powerful tool, and every human should be able to access that tool. Getting an education should not be based on gender, religion, ethnicity, nor race, nor should it send people or families broke. We must share the power of education so that scared 15-year-old girl doesn't feel like she is embarrassed or ashamed because she couldn't understand the question that was being asked. Fast forward nearly 40 years. I remember walking into Harkness House in New York on the Upper East Side, and I do mean upper. Knowing many of the Harkness Fellows on paper, knowing what people look like, yet feeling very much detached, yet at the same time connected. For a socially awkward human being, these gatherings fill me with dread. We were all here as Harkness Fellow awardees, yet I didn't feel like I was one of the group. Over time and many walks, wonderful conversations, laughter later, I feel that I'm getting to know you as human beings that have worked hard, shared passion and showed vulnerability. Even though our experiences of the Harkness year will be vastly different, I no longer feel detached. I see passion and I see you. And I believe that we will all make a difference in our fields, because at the centre of all of our collective works is the desire to change the world through our thoughts, words and actions. And whether you admit it or not, you have to be a responsible partner in relationships. This means continuing to put your own work on yourself so that you can be a good partner. You might remember at the start of my story that of shame and what these emotions did to fuel my work in myself and to be more educated. And I sit here today in privilege, the privilege of my own education and what that privilege has given us and where it has taken us. I ask that we look around to see the joy that each of us have and realise that education has given us a joyful challenge, and not just to see the obvious, but to look, and I mean really look, and see those that are missing out, to use our voices, use our spheres of influences, to lean hard into our privileges and make sure that education can be for everyone. I'm a Wiradjuri woman, you know. I know who I am because of the women that have been in my life, and I've had the honour to witness theirs. You know, I'm a daughter, I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm, you know, lots of things, different things to different people, enemies to some. But even in those spaces that you want to still make sure that the relationship is defined by how you want it to be. And so even my enemies, I would say I still treat with kindness.
Faye delves a little more into her childhood and how the common thread for her was always home.
Growing up in Trangie and moving around, and, you know, my childhood experiences, like many, were mine, and not always positive, but, you know, on the same hand, there was beautiful moments that shaped who I was and how I wanted to be in this world. You know, it was my position in the family. You know, I wasn't the oldest, I wasn't the youngest. You know, there was always lots of us around. And, you know, I wanted to be the connection that kept people together. I wanted everybody to be happy. I didn't want fights. I didn't want those things. And I think those things have carried through, you know, going from Trangie to Emerald in Queensland and Rockhampton, and then, you know, down to Frankston, Victoria, and then back to Sydney, and then, you know, moving from Sydney out to Trangie, back again, and then to Cowra, you know, that I think the constant thread for me was home, was knowing that Nan and then Mum were there. Who is Faye Beverly? Blossom, Bloss, you know, Auntie, you know, Mimi, Mudgy, all of those things. Who am I? You know, I never set out to be professionally where I am, but I did set out to make a difference in people's lives with the career I chose to be part of. As a pharmacist, I wanted to be involved in people's lives, and I wanted to be an opportunity of safe harbour, for want of a better word, of using my skills, knowledge and expertise as a pharmacist. I think, you know, if I accept the level of vulnerability that comes with being me, that I'm imperfectly perfect, that, you know, the bits that I see as broken are the bits that I think others find some connection with, because they at times feel broken too. And so, you know, for others, you know, the daily challenge of seeing what I see in the mirror compared to what other people see in the mirror, they're the bits that, you know, I think are very at times hard. We don't get to determine our legacy, or if we have a legacy. That gets determined by others, and it's how you've made them feel, and a reason, season, or life. And for some, it's, you know, a moment that's fleeting and but you don't even know the impact you've left on somebody.
Faye talks about becoming a mother and how it forced her to reflect on what her own mother may have gone through.
I did become a mum myself, and I do. I have two amazing children that challenge me on a daily basis. And I say that with all the love that a parent has for a child, with the frustration that sits alongside of. Seriously, I don't think I was that dumb, but, I'm sure I probably was. And I mean, there have been moments where, without, wanting to scare our mother, to ring and just say, I am so sorry, because, I sit and I think, did I deliberately or unintentionally hurt mum with my comments or the way I spoke? And just even the lack of acknowledgement of her struggles, and that I didn't see her as a human being.
As well as her own two children, Faye has looked after other family members as though they were her own. She discusses how this concept runs a lot stronger through the Aboriginal culture than some others.
Whilst I have two biological children, I have multiple children that have come through my relationships, whether it's directly with siblings or, that when they're in my care, and sometimes it has been, extended periods of time, that I treat them like they're mine, and that I do for them like, most people assume that you do only for biological children. And that's the way we do things, is that extension of family is more than just, what Western society thinks, well, that's your family. And you would do that for your family, but extended family or, kinship doesn't exist in the same way it does for us. And I acknowledge that there are other cultures that do, extend that relational caring role. But as I said, I think for me, this project has really brought up how hard we are on ourselves, and this stoic notion of just keep going when there are moments that, you are in a bathroom and you go, I'm just getting in the shower so that they don't get to hear you cry. That, you find ways that don't raise suspicion of those that you are trying to care and support, to how vulnerable you are in moments or how frustrated you are in moments. And, that's been a huge revelation to myself as this project and life alongside of the project has gone on. Has just been this whole notion of how unkind I am to myself at times.
In this next section, Faye discusses the notion of obligation and if it relates to her instinctively becoming a carer.
Obligation, again, it's still trying to use Western words to try and define the emotions that are attached to being a carer, to actually being in that relationship with a person, that we go, obligation. If you said obligation to somebody, it would still have a connotation that it means that you have to do it. Well, I think Yinjamara is the way, for me, that through using my language, that I see caring as being, which is to honour and go slow, and really to acknowledge that our journeys are happening alongside of others, and we have to accept that experience will be different, and how do we bring those together. And it is a respect and it is an honour. And as you say, and for some people who, learning language, don't know language, or any of those things, it is a challenge to reconcile the emotions that they have with the words that are used to define what they are as carers. So words such as obligation means to them that you're forced into doing it. And it is that rub that, yes, there is part of it that you are forced into doing, but it's also, I'm not forced because I'm being, coerced. It's, I'm forced into this because I want the best. I want the best for whomever I'm caring for, and that means that I'm going to accept being a carer. And whether that's at birth, whether that comes later in life, whatever or whenever.
Faye was asked about her first recollection of care and kindness and how that impacted her life.
One point in my life, there was 4 generations of Aboriginal women living in one house. And, I don't necessarily remember the activities, but I remember the way I felt when I would yell at Gran about, did she want a cup of tea? And that if I was with her, I would hold her hand, that notion of connectedness. So, from 2 or 3 years old, I wanted to be in that space. I wanted to use that human connectedness to do things that showed that not just I care, but support them through wherever they were. And so for me, I genuinely think I was born to be a carer in some way, and I think my profession has led me in that too, that I chose a profession that modelled my values, that modelled what I wanted to be in this world, which was somebody that was able to support people in their journey. I chose pharmacy. I didn't choose to be a carer, but I think it chose me. The Yinjamara to me is that recognition that, or using Lady Gaga, I was born this way, and it came through the inheritance and the song lines that I was given through generational connections, that being who I am was shaped and guided by the DNA that I was given, and we now know that that is so critical to outcomes of people. That DNA that came from that bloodline, but also the shaping of seeing the strength, the determination, the resilience, in spite of so many challenges that occurred for the generations of women that I truly had the honor of knowing and feeling in my life, not just seeing, but truly feeling their presence in what I do and how I respond. To me, that's how I understand my place.
We move on to hearing about the plight of people being cared for and how important it is to Faye that they are seen for who they are and not just a diagnosis.
And I am a carer, and it is a role that I do feel honoured to hold, that in moments in other people's lives, that whether it's short or long, that they know beyond any shadow of a doubt that you are one of their you are one of their people, that they authentically can be who they are. But in being a carer, you're also trying to ensure that they can authentically be who they are to the rest of the world as well. When you care for somebody, particularly if it's a medical thing, they see the medical before they see the person. They will look at the diagnosis and they will look at, the physicality, or they'll look at, medications. They will make judgments. And for me, the greatest honor about being a carer is trying to make them see the person, make them realize that that is one part of their narrative. That is one part of who they are. That is not all of them. They are not there in those moments where, even when things aren't going particularly well, they look at you in a particular way that just makes everything worthwhile. They make a small gesture that in almost any other circumstances would seem inconsequential.
Faye is on the steering committee for the Elder Women as Carers project, where 85 Aboriginal carers and clinical health professionals were interviewed. The aim of the project was to identify ways to support these women in their caring roles.
The uncomfortableness for myself, and not speaking for any of the other women involved in the project, is that we don't want the spotlight on us. We just want those that we are in caring relationships with to be valued. It's hard to sit here and talk about caring as if we're the ones that should receive the focus. As I said, part of the outcome of the project is the need for greater self-care, but it's also the need for society to recognise that that needs to happen, and it needs to happen in our way, and that, severing the understanding of the roles. Being a matriarch is different to being a carer, but being a carer is involved in being a matriarch. It is this notion of how do we holistically look at the carer and acknowledge the parts that they need nurturing in those moments, where we can allow other aspects of our roles, of who we are in any of the spaces, to flourish. How we can feel pride and connection to the work using a Western, language of all the things that we do, that make the reality of who we are in that relationship to that person we're caring for. And as I said, it's demonstrating that society has, again, put Aboriginal women as carers down the bottom, and we need to elevate that up. And when we truly hear those voices and truly incorporate those into the practices of how we are able to care for with pride, with dignity, with culture, and all of those things, then that's when, being a carer will be celebrated daily, not just celebrated in Carers Week or Volunteers Week or whatever week they assign us. It's a bit like Reconciliation Week. We exist 24/7, 365 in this world, not just in those moments of reflection from the broader society, that we get this opportunity to have a relationship with those that we're in caring with, but we also have the opportunity to be in a relationship with a system that acknowledges how powerful that can be. And I think that's what, from my point of view, this project has done, has really illuminated that the women we have spoken to as part of this project really deserve to be illuminated, because they have taken on personas, they have challenged themselves, and when we value that, we illuminate it so that others can see.
As we near the end of this episode, Faye discusses the importance of how the term carer is perceived.
That's also the recognition of the relationship we exist between other carers, which is how we take the words of I am a carer as a strength and not as a vulnerability, not as an activity, not as a chore. And we allow moments of real strength in the terms of I am a carer, and it's not a deficit, and it does use our culture, and it does take from our knowledge of that has been shared with us.
Faye outlines the most important thing to have come out of this project, and that is connection between carers.
We don't see ourselves the way others see us, and when somebody sees us in a particular way, and when you're not feeling particularly good about yourself, and you hear those words from other people who truly know you, who have seen you and understand you, then you just don't feel as alone. And that's what this project has really done, is really given us space to recognise that when we do think we're alone, that we're not. And that's been an absolute gift.
That brings us to the end of the interview with Professor Faye McMillan, distinguished Wiradjuri Yena and community matriarch. This podcast series, Hearing from the Matriarchs, is brought to you by the New South Wales Mental Health Commission. It is an initiative of Bagaragan, the all-Indigenous, all-female steering committee of the Elder Women as Carers project. Podcast recording by Bunjagiri Consulting and editing by Venture Films. Narrated by Dizzy Doolan and recorded by Pegasus Studios.